The shores of Costa Rica, a tropical playground fit for a college student. Shannon Martin was one of them, but it wasn't the sun or the sand that drew her here. It was the forest, the culture, the education.
Her goal in life was to learn as much as she could and to travel in order to teach and write books and help make the world a better place.
By all accounts, the University of Kansas student learned all she could about her adoptive land, including its dark side, something she would only learn in the final minutes of her life. The 23-year-old stabbed to death just steps from her residence. The horror resonated from Costa Rica to Kansas.
I remember screaming really loudly, and I remember just not being able to stand. I think I probably fell down.
But Shannon's struggle would not end when her life did. What followed was a fight for justice carried on by her loved ones. Just as Shannon got the education of her life in Costa Rica, her mother was about to get the same.
I didn't realize what was lying in wait for my daughter.
Shannon Martin grew up in Topeka as a child born with the qualities that usually take years to learn.
I look at her as a mentor. She had more tenacity, she had more support, more advocacy for everyone, no matter nationality, no matter disability, no matter what.
She was one of my best friends from the moment I met her.
Friends like Kyle Maud say Shannon always had an appetite for life itself, one only hampered by the hours in a day.
She had this ambition that I feel like a lot of young people don't have.
Ambition that took her to the University of Kansas and the doorstep of Professor David Besson. He recalls meeting Shannon after a jog around campus.
And I said, well, why don't you give me, 15 minutes or so, let me take a shower and clean up. And her response was, that's okay, I don't mind the stench. And I always liked the fact that she was just so candid and just so upfront.
For 2 years, Shannon's charm is common knowledge at KU, and in true form, she does not discriminate when extending a hand.
When she was in college, I had a class with a lady that was blind, and so Shannon would start walking her dog and with the lady and her CNI dog every night. I mean, Shannon was just like that.
By her junior year, Shannon's thirst for knowledge and humanity is barely quenched. She sees Costa Rica as the perfect outlet. Through a study abroad program, Shannon spends months researching a rare fern and its environmental benefits.
And loved it, absolutely loved it there. It was her lifestyle. Outdoors, everybody rode bikes. Shannon didn't want a car. She didn't wear a lot of makeup. She didn't worry about things like that. She just loved nature.
Shannon returns to KU for her final year, though her work in Costa Rica is part of a senior thesis. To complete it, she must go back to Costa Rica for 1 week.
Shannon was so excited to have the opportunity to go back and see her friends, her host family, loved the environment, the beauty of the tropic.
In May of 2001, Shannon is back in the land she loves, absorbing the culture and working hard. Her chance to let loose comes at a party, to be held at this outdoor bar. For Shannon, it's a time to meet up with a friend she made barely a year before. By the end of the night, though, Shannon is dead, her body stabbed more than a dozen times.
On Mother's Day, May 13, 2001, I get the call. That's a parent's nightmare. 6:30 in the morning, I received the call, and the gentleman from the U.S. Embassy in Costa Rica said, "Are you Jeanette Stauffer?" I said, "Yes." "Are you the mother of Shannon Lucille Martin?" I said, "Yes," and my heart just sank. And he said, "I have very bad news. Your daughter's been murdered."
The news brings more than a shock. It's also laced with confusion. Friend Kyle Maud gets the call while working in New York.
Even coming home to Kansas, there was nothing to do. We were still a million miles away and a million questions away from knowing what had happened that night.
Officials from Costa Rica and the U.S. Embassy tell Shannon's family Their daughter was socializing at the open-air bar and was stabbed to death down the street outside her host family's home. At the crime scene, investigators find their first clue, a torn shirt. It is traced to this woman, seen at the bar the night of the murder. Her name is Costa Cruz, and she is now the prime suspect in the murder of Shannon Martin.
So when I get calls from the Today Show, from Good Morning, from all these other places, I said, no, I don't need to go. It appears it's going to be solved. Was that ever a mistake?
May 13th, 2001, the worst Mother's Day ever for Jeanette Stauffer. Her daughter, Shannon Martin, is murdered in Costa Rica while on a study abroad trip for the University of Kansas. Authorities tell Jeanette her daughter was strangled and stabbed more than a dozen times.
To know the night she came home on the flight was the same night she was supposed to walk off the plane and not be carried in a box off the plane.
As Shannon Martin is laid to rest in Kansas, authorities are hunting a killer in Costa Rica. That hunt turns up not one, but 3 people, all arrested for the killing. One of them, Costa Cruz, is linked to a torn shirt found at the crime scene and to the same outdoor bar Shannon visited the night of her death. Cruz later pawned Shannon's earring in a nearby town.
It was a relief to know that they had been arrested, and I kept being told, and my American attorney kept being told, that this is going to be solved. It just takes a matter of time.
But time would soon become an enemy. A lack of evidence allows 2 of the suspects to walk, and no clear motive for the crime emerges. Meantime, Costa Rican officials are sharing very little with Jeanette Stauffer, who feels justice for Shannon slipping away.
She no longer had any life in her to fight. She fought to her last breath. She fought as hard as she could. She wanted to live. She wanted to live. And all I could do is take over on her behalf.
Jeanette flies to Costa Rica with an attorney and finds the case is in worse shape than she thought.
There was blood, there were pants with blood on them that had never been tested. There was other information and evidence that should have been tested. There were witnesses that should have been talked to that weren't. I couldn't read the file.
But her anger with Costa Rican authorities only thickens the wall between them. Nearly 2 years would pass with little movement in the case. Still, local laws allow the lone suspect to remain in custody. It is little consolation, though, for Shannon's loved ones back in Kansas.
I was frustrated by the whole process because I felt like Jeanette was the only person that was doing anything to capture these people, to look for these people, to try and get this investigation started.
An investigation that would get its biggest jumpstart in 2003. That's when Jeanette learned a Costa Rican law allows victims to hire their own investigator. In no time, she turns to Larry Thomas. He is not from Costa Rica, rather from Jeanette's own backyard, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
I recognize the name as a person from the same area that my kids have grown up.
Thomas is aware of the Shannon Martin case through news reports, and after meeting with Jeanette, Thomas discovers he knows her from more than just the papers.
And as soon as I saw her, I remembered that I had stood next to her filming our kids in some of the school functions.
At first, Thomas acts as a consultant, but the more he advises Jeanette, the deeper he gets into the case.
My mind is thinking that, you know, to really get involved, we have to be on the ground there to get a sense of the crime scene, the people, and that's what we ended up doing.
It is the first time a KBI agent will work a case outside of Kansas. There is an obvious problem, though: language. Interpreter Jesse Ibarra becomes the Spanish voice of Agent Thomas.
In the interpreting business, you really don't know what's going to come up from one time to the other, so I had no idea what to expect.
Once in Costa Rica, the team pores over the case file, beginning with the autopsy.
It was determined that she died of more or less blood loss due to multiple stab wounds. They estimated she was stabbed at least 15 times. The hyoid bone in the throat, which is fractured from manual strangulation, was fractured, so she had struggled and was probably throttled around the neck.
The autopsy also shows hair in Shannon's hand, suggesting she put up a fight before she died.
And with all these clumps of hair, which now I don't remember, but it was close to 180. And it ended up all but 5 were hers. Somebody was grabbing her from the back, and she pulled out, bless her heart, her own hair trying to get free.
They are details that only heighten Agent Thomas's investigative instinct and his need to find a killer.
When you see what torture some person has been put through, that really, I guess, does motivate you to want to find the person responsible, not only to bring them to justice for that victim, but it's just an indication of what they are capable of doing to other victims.
It is clear to Thomas that Costa Rican authorities were right about one thing. Evidence points to the involvement of 29-year-old Katia Cruz. But Shannon's body is found some 50 feet from one of her sandals, suggesting she put up a fight and was dragged, something it would likely take more than one person to accomplish. Proving that is another story. There is literally no forensic evidence from the scene. Police even handed over Shannon's blood-soaked purse to her host mother. She washed away the crucial evidence.
It wasn't till 2 years later that I found out she panicked with the purse and didn't know what to do, but all she thought is, I've got to clean the blood off this purse to give it back to the mother.
Investigators realize they will have to get answers the old-fashioned way. They start by retracing Shannon's steps, beginning here at the Jurassic Bar, where Shannon was socializing with friends.
We have confirmation that she arrived at Jurassic Bar, was drinking, dancing, and having fun with her friends.
A maintenance problem with the restroom forces dozens of patrons outside that night. Most are urinating in public. Friends say Shannon, too, had to go.
And so I think that Shannon, being a little bit more moral, just didn't want to go outside and urinate outside like the rest of the girls were doing.
Shannon heads for her host residence, which is just a few minutes from the bar. Authorities believe she started down the road, used the restroom at her home, and was ambushed as she headed back to the party.
We speculate in the area of possibly they wanted to rob her, possibly sexually abuse her. We really never really determined what the true motive was.
After tracing Shannon's steps, the investigators know they must now find new witnesses. They begin by simply observing the habits of Costa Ricans.
That was one of the most obvious things when we showed up, that probably the primary transportation mode besides walking was the taxi cabs.
In fact, a taxi cab driver has already told Costa Rican police he saw 2 other men with Katia Cruz the night of the murder. They are known to investigators as Caballo and Coco, the latter a known drug runner in Costa Rica. Unfortunately, the taxi driver is also suspected of dealing drugs and has now fled the city. If they're going to prove their case, KBI agents must sink deeper into the streets of Golfito.
They went into areas that most people that live in Golfito wouldn't have gone into. They knew. They went in late at night so they wouldn't be seen, and so the people would feel comfortable talking.
One of them, a man who puts teeth into the case against the suspect, known as Caballo. The two spoke the day after the murder, with Caballo displaying obvious scratches to the face.
And that he had asked him personally what those scratches were from. And he had given some other story, and he said, and he told him directly to his face, I know where you got those scratches.
With their case building word of mouth, the KBI gets a letter from someone at the club the night of the party. Inside the envelope, a photo from inside the club. Insignificant at first until agents take a closer look. In it, the drug-running suspect known as Coco. The photo putting him near known drug user and prime suspect, Katia Cruz, and both of them in the same proximity of the victim.
That's another piece of evidence you can show the court and say, he's there, he's in the middle of this. So he did, if he's a drug dealer, as people say he is, and there's people here wanting drugs, Katia's wanting drugs, then that would be a reason for them to be together. So that helps you show that he's in the mix.
But being at a bar with the victim and being responsible for her murder are two different stories. Stories that will merge when the KBI uncovers a witness that could break the case. Revelations that some want kept silent and will do anything to get their way.
There were threats that they were going to be coming in and shooting up the place. There were threats against the life of some of the witnesses.
As weeks pass, the KBI is slowly connecting with the locals in Golfito, Costa Rica. Interpreter Jesse Ibarra not only uses language to his advantage, but also culture, knowing sympathy for Shannon's mother will get him far.
It's the Latin syndrome of the strong mother type of icon in the culture, and I think that I played on that, and also on the fact that the truth should be known.
The strategy works, eventually bringing forward a taxicab washer. He claims to have seen two of the suspects the night of the murder. What's more, he says he can put Shannon Martin's own blood on the hands of those suspects. For now, though, he is reluctant to go on the record.
Then we had a few drinks with him. We socialized with him and got him to trust us. And from then on, he was willing to talk to both of us at the same time, anytime, any place.
That place turns out to be a hotel in Golfito. That's where the witness tells agents he saw Cruz and Caballo getting out of a cab moments before he washed it.
And he washed this cab, and in the back where these two had been, and he saw them get out of the cab, so he knows that they were the last ones in there. They bring it over to the wash depot, and he washes what he, it's a dark substance, somewhat dried, and it was mostly around the door panel, around the handles, and some maybe on the seat, he thought.
In hindsight, the washer realizes he erased important evidence, blood evidence, in the back of that cab. But his story is still crucial to the case.
When you have a theory that there's more people involved, and now you've been able to find a person that puts the defendant that you can strictly or definitely tie to the case with the person shortly after the crime, then yes, that gives you a level of excitement that you're finally breaking through the barrier.
It is a circumstantial case, but one agents feel will have to do. They take the newfound witnesses to prosecutors, who take the case to trial in November of 2003. The evidence against Cruz is solid. Her shirt found at the crime scene, Shannon's earring pawned by Cruz after the murder. The case against Caballo relies on the cab washer's story and on a witness identifying scratches on Caballo's face the morning after the killing. Against Coco, though, the evidence is thin. Little more than a photograph putting him at the bar, and a second-hand story linking him to Cruz and Caballo. A three-judge tribunal will decide if that evidence is enough to convict.
That's what most people that knew something about the case thought it was a 50-50 shot. But I guess knowing the inner workings of the case and what I observed in the files and the photographs and the interviews, I just felt more confident.
As the trial opens, it is a turning point for Shannon's friends and colleagues, who for 2 years have wondered why she had to die and why here.
Unfortunately, life without risk is a pretty, uneventful life. And, unfortunately, you can't second guess these things.
As the trial moves forward, witness after witness takes the stand, each one a small part to the whole truth. Remove just one of them and the case is a long shot. It is a reality that puts lives in danger.
There had been death threats phoned into the courts, and so the courts were shut down, and some of the witnesses had been threatened as well. Their life had been threatened by some of the relatives of the suspects.
A witness was coming from another community, and the bus was stopped, and there were people trying to get her off the bus. And law enforcement had been notified, and so they prevented it happening. So one of our witnesses that was very crucial would have probably been killed.
Not only are witnesses threatened, so too are the Kansas investigators working the case.
I was concerned for Jesse and Larry. Yes, I was, because they knew, everybody in that community knew it was Larry Thomas, KBI agent, and Jesse Ibarra that were solving the case.
The KBI is given military protection throughout the trial, but the threats are merely a distraction. The trial will go on, and one of its most important witnesses will take the stand. Shannon's own mother will soon testify, putting her face-to-face with the accused for the first time.
No, she wasn't going to break me. I stared right back at her. She destroyed my child, but she wasn't going to destroy me.
As the trial continues in the Shannon Martin case, humanizing the victim is key to the prosecution.
Shannon struggled with all of her life, and that was obvious at the crime scene. And we had to show what type of person she was and how she would have reacted in those situations. So it helped tie together that it would probably take 2 or 3 people to get Shannon down.
Shannon's mother, Jeanette Stauffer, takes the stand, telling the court her daughter is indeed a fighter.
She was a gymnast, she was a vegetarian, she ran every day, she didn't have anything but muscle and strength.
As Jeanette testifies, she looks the accused in their eyes. They return the favor with little compassion.
Oh, I looked at them, and I looked at Joe, particularly Claudia, trying to stare me down. No, she wasn't going to break me. I stared right back at her, and I did, and I didn't break down, I don't think at all during the whole trial. I wasn't going to allow her. She destroyed my child, but she wasn't going to destroy me.
When the prosecution rests, the defense takes over. It calls few witnesses and instead attacks the credibility of the witnesses who've implicated the defendants.
The defense didn't have much of a defense. They were basically just throwing dirt at the prosecution's case.
When testimony is complete, the 3-judge panel makes its decision. In the case of Cruz and Caballo, guilty of murder. The judgment sends the defendant's side of the courtroom into chaos.
Get up and start screaming at the tribunal, and there's chaos from the audience, and the suspects start to cry, or the convicts start crying and becoming emotional.
Their sentence, 15 years in prison, later upped to 30. A judge then reads the verdict for the final suspect, known as Coco. He is not guilty. The second-hand testimony against him wasn't good enough, but the judges added they had little appetite for what they were doing.
He told Coco that when he read the acquittal, that don't think because we've acquitted you, we don't think you didn't do it. Basically, he told him that.
Still, Coco was far from a free man. In fact, authorities charged him with another murder committed since Shannon's death. Months later, he was convicted and sent to prison.
So I knew that he wasn't going to be on the streets to harm other people. So that was, even though we couldn't convict him of Shannon's death, I knew that he wasn't going to be able to hurt other people.
In the end, the convictions brought justice for Shannon's mother, something that to her once seemed impossible.
They walked the streets after my daughter was killed for how many years? Because of incompetence, and within, 4 months because of the KBI? Guess what? They're sentenced.
While Jeanette believes her daughter was to be sexually assaulted that night and perhaps robbed, the official motive for the crime never came out in court.
Why did it have to happen to Shannon? Why did it have to happen to Shannon? Why did they do it? What's their excuse? I would love to be able to talk to them and know why they had to do it.
They are questions shared by the KBI, who in the end found justice in a far land, but still gave the credit to Shannon's mother.
We went along to help because we thought it was a worthy cause, and we wanted to help, and we wanted to do something about it, and we didn't want these people to get away with their actions. But she's the true hero here.
Remembering Jeanette and I standing there side by side, videotaping our kids together, made it extra special to me to be able to prove that the people that killed her didn't get away with it.
Since the trial, though, life has been no easier for Jeanette Stauffer.
And closure, what does that mean? There's no closure. Once you've lost a child, there's never closure until I'm buried 6 foot under.
An outlet for her grief comes through tireless work in Shannon's name. Jeanette formed the Shannon Martin Foundation, keeping her daughter's memory alive through a KU scholarship fund and an English center in Golfito. Those closest to Shannon say, despite her death, her love for Costa Rica would not have changed.
You have to know people in Golfito. I love the community. I love the people. There are a lot of reasons they have an underlying group of people with crime and drugs, and that's a whole nother story. But there are a lot of good people there that suffered. Every time I went to Golfito, people would hug me and say, "I'm so sorry."
For her professors, there are no regrets, no second guesses, knowing that Shannon went to a country she loved, doing the work she seemed born to do.
if she hadn't have gone, she wouldn't have been Shannon. She wouldn't have been engaging that vivacious part of herself that inspired the rest of us.
Along with the Shannon Martin Foundation, Jeanette Stauffer finds comfort in helping others. She works as a victims coordinator for the Kansas Attorney General.
People find me all over the country that have lost family members in Costa Rica, Belize, Aruba, and it is gratifying to know that I can help provide them some guidance.
For her closest friends, keeping Shannon alive means more than just recalling fond memories.
She was an extraordinary person, there's no doubt about it. But I think for me the most important thing is to remember her, and remember her in a real way. Remember the fighting, remember the stubbornness, but to just keep her real.
It is obvious Shannon's death led to emotions her family never dared to feel, a sign that even in death, Shannon was challenging others, teaching them to endure sides of life they never dared to see, and to go on living in a way she always dared to live.
To love people, love life, enjoy every day, and lend a hand to anybody in need. That was Shannon's philosophy. What more can you be to someone than a friend, to reach out to somebody in need, to love the world, to try to make it a better place? And that's what Shannon represented.